When you think about India and Pakistan, the narrative we usually hear is, well, friction, isn't it? Tension, conflict, it seems constant.
It often dominates the headlines, yes.
But we're going to set that aside today, just for a bit, and look at something different. A really surprising chapter, the Lahore Declaration of 1999.
Ah, yes, a fascinating moment.
It really is. It's a story filled with, well, courage, some intense diplomacy, and these big dreams for peace. Even though, spoiler alert, it didn't last, it still says a lot.
It absolutely does. And looking at moments like Lahore helps us understand the relationship isn't just one single story. There are these other possibilities, these different paths that were at least briefly explored.
Right. So to really get why this was such a big deal, we need to set the scene. Think back to 1998.
Mm-hmm. The nuclear tests.
Exactly. Both India and Pakistan conduct nuclear tests.
Yeah.
Suddenly the whole world is watching, and frankly, pretty anxious.
And understandably so. You have two neighboring countries already with a history of conflict, now both nuclear armed. The stakes just went sky high globally.
It changed everything.
It really did. Those tests in May '98 fundamentally shifted the strategic landscape. But paradoxically, that heightened sense of danger, that existential threat, might have actually created a small opening, a window for something bold.
And bold it was. Because then, February 1999 rolls around, and the Indian Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, does something quite extraordinary.
The bus journey.
He decides to take a bus.
A bus directly to Lahore in Pakistan. I mean, just picture that. The leader of India crossing the border by road for peace.
The symbolism was immense.
It captured everyone's attention. It's still kind of stunning to think about today, isn't it? That direct, almost vulnerable kind of gesture.
And choosing a bus specifically, it wasn't some hidden back-channel meeting. It was public, visible. It felt like a very deliberate, almost personal way of reaching out, cutting through some of the usual formal layers.
So he arrives in Lahore. He's greeted by Pakistan's Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif. And this wasn't just handshakes for the cameras, though. Those pictures were historic in themselves.
No, there was substance planned. Right. On February 21st, 1999, they signed the Lahore Declaration. And this wasn't just flowery language about peace. It was a proper agreement. It laid out specific commitments.
Exactly. It really focused on three core areas. First, reaffirming basic principles, the UN Charter, resolving disputes peacefully, respecting sovereignty and territory.
Foundational stuff.
Foundational, but important to restate. Second, and this was critical given the nuclear tests just months before, a real emphasis on nuclear safety. Measures to prevent accidents, miscalculations.
Makes sense. Very necessary.
Absolutely. And third, trying to build connections beyond the governments, encouraging cultural links, economic ties, more contact between ordinary people.
And thinking about that visit, for me, one of the most powerful images, the most significant moments, was Vajpayee going to Minar, Pakistan.
Ah, yes. That was huge.
For anyone listening who doesn't know, this monument is deeply symbolic. It marks the spot where the resolution calling for the creation of Pakistan was passed. So for an Indian prime minister to go there,
it felt like a massive gesture, almost an implicit acknowledgement, perhaps, of Pakistan's existence, its legitimacy, in a way that went beyond just political necessity, a human gesture.
Totally. It wasn't about arguing history. It felt like respect.
And Nawaz Sharif himself said later that this visit, this specific act, touched the hearts of millions of Pakistanis, which highlights that this wasn't just about the two leaders. It resonated much more widely.
It tapped into something deeper, didn't it? That shared heritage, the desire for peace among regular people divided by the border.
Precisely. It moved beyond just government-to-government interaction for a moment.
And looking at the actual text of the declaration, some of the wording is really striking. There's this line: "The two prime ministers shall intensify their efforts to resolve all issues, including the issue of Jammu and Kashmir."
The K word right there.
Yeah, and Kashmir is, of course, the longest-standing, most sensitive issue. But the phrasing here, intensify their efforts, resolve all issues, but crucially, doing it peacefully. No threats, no deadlines mentioned, just dialogue.
Exactly. Committing to intensify efforts within that peaceful framework was key. It acknowledged Kashmir's centrality without using aggressive posturing. It seemed to genuinely open a door for talking, for sustained engagement.
And given, as you said, the nuclear tests were so recent, that part about nuclear risk reduction was absolutely vital too.
Couldn't be more important at that point.
Setting up hotlines, clear communication channels to avoid, accidental war, misunderstandings. It seems like basic common sense, but formalizing it in that climate,
Yeah.
that was a big step.
It was a direct acknowledgement that the nuclear dimension changed the rules. With nuclear weapons, you just don't have the same margin for error. So focusing on clear communication, preventing misinterpretation, that was essential.
So you have this declaration, these symbolic gestures.
Yeah.
What was the reaction like? In India, in Pakistan?
From everything we know, it was overwhelmingly positive. Really quite remarkable so on both sides. Yes. Indian newspapers were talking about a second chance, maybe, to heal the wounds of partition. Over in Pakistan, headlines were calling it a major diplomatic breakthrough.
Wow. So real optimism.
Tangible hope. People held candlelight vigils for peace. There were concrete proposals flying around, new bus routes to connect families separated for decades, cultural exchange programs being planned.
I remember reading about families, people who hadn't seen relatives since 1947, suddenly writing letters, actually booking travel, thinking they might finally meet again.
That personal dimension, the prospect of reconnecting, that resonated so deeply with ordinary people, it went far beyond politics.
And even popular culture picked up on it, right? Bollywood films like Veer Zara, Gedar,
Yeah.
maybe not directly caused by it, but tapping into that same feeling, that longing for connection across the border.
That cultural reflection shows how deep it went. It wasn't just a political agreement gathering dust. It touched a nerve in the collective imagination.
But then, the hope was so high, and then came the crash, just 3 months later.
Yes, the heartbreak, really.
The infiltration started in Kargil, in Kashmir, Pakistani forces moving into Indian-held territory. Reports suggested it was directed by General Pervez Musharraf, perhaps even without Prime Minister Sharif fully knowing the extents initially.
It led, of course, to the Kargil War.
So you had this incredible peak of hope, this feeling that maybe, finally, things could change. And then almost immediately, it crumbled. So fragile.
The Kargil conflict was devastating, not just the tragic loss of life on both sides, but it just completely shattered the trust that had carefully, tentatively begun to build in Lahore.
Utterly shattered it. Reports said Vajpayee felt personally betrayed, furious. He'd just shaken hands, signed this peace deal with Sharif, and now Sharif's own military was undermining it all.
Understandably so.
And the Lahore Declaration itself, it basically became collateral damage. This promising plan, this roadmap, just pushed aside by conflict.
Kargil really threw the complexities into sharp relief. It showed how fragile peace processes can be, and maybe suggested that not everyone, particularly within parts of the military establishment perhaps, was fully on board with the Lahore spirit.
But even though it ended so badly, so quickly, the Lahore Declaration, it still matters, doesn't it? People still talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. It remains a significant reference point, a reminder that even with all the political pressure, all the historical baggage, leaders can choose peace. They can make those bold moves, even if the moment doesn't last forever.
It showed it was possible.
Exactly. It demonstrated that diplomacy is never really wasted. Even if it fails in the short term, every handshake, every signed paper, every bus journey like Vajpayee's, it plants a seed. It creates a possibility for the future.
There are those quotes, too. Nawaz Sharif saying something like, "We can only change our past by changing our future."
A powerful way to put it.
And Vajpayee, in his Lahore speech, famously said, "You can change your friends, but not your neighbors."
Both quotes really get to the heart of it, the inescapable geography, the shared history. It means finding a way to coexist peacefully is ultimately necessary, however difficult it proves.
So when we look back at Lahore now, maybe the biggest takeaway is that peace isn't a straight line. It zigzags. There are steps forward and then, sadly, steps back.
That's often the reality.
But that 1999 moment, it's still a glowing dot in that zigzag, isn't it? Proof that diplomacy, when it's backed by real courage, can be revolutionary, even if the shadow of conflict falls over it later.
It underscores why you have to keep trying, why dialogue, why engagement remains so important even when things look bleak. The spirit of Lahore showed a different future wasn't impossible.
It really did.
Briefly, maybe, but it was there.
Well, next time, we are going to dive right into what happened next, the Kargil conflict. A very different kind of story, much more about military confrontation, so please do join us for that deep dive.
It's a crucial part of understanding the aftermath.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And if you're interested in reading the Lahore Declaration for yourself, we've put a link in the show notes. We'd also genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Or if you have any memories or stories from that time, please reach out.
Yes, please do.
This has been The Deep Dive. Until our next conversation, let's try and keep those borderlines open for hope.